My name is Christina, and I recently turned 28. I work at a tech company downtown, surrounded every day by numbers, code, meetings, and endless deadlines. And yes, I get paid well, which should be enough for everything a young woman dreams of. But I often feel like I've lost something far more valuable along with this income. The feeling of being wanted, of being needed without reason or conditions. I have a family. My parents, who have been married for 30 years and still hold hands when they walk down the street together, and my younger sister, Selena, who is 24 and who always seemed like the best friend I could confide in. But sometimes I catch myself thinking that perhaps that closeness lived more in my head than in her heart. It was a Thursday, and the day itself would have been unremarkable if not for my parents' anniversary, which they had decided to celebrate with extra pomp at the chic Italian restaurant Romano's. My mother had been talking about it for at least 2 weeks, emphasizing that this year they wanted to do something unforgettable, gather all the family around the table, and reminisce about all they had experienced over 3 decades of marriage. I remember her call that morning when she said, "Christina, just don't be late. We've reserved a table for 15 people. Everyone will be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins. You understand how important this is." I, placing the phone between my shoulder and ear, quickly replied, "Mom, I've already told you 3 times I'll be there, don't worry," even though deep down I knew work would try to ruin my promises again. And so it happened. My boss put a folder marked urgent on his desk at precisely 6 o'clock in the evening, and when I mentioned I had plans, he smiled and uttered his favorite phrase, "Give me 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes stretched into half an hour, and by 6:45, I was running to the car, feeling panic rising in my chest. I rushed into Romano's at 7:30, and the first thing I did was look at my watch, realizing I was already half an hour late. A wave of guilt washed over me, so familiar and lingering, as if I were a schoolgirl again, arriving home late. The hostess led me to a distant table, and from just a few steps away, I sensed something strange. People were sitting relaxed, talking, laughing, and the table was littered with empty plates and glasses, each holding only a thin crimson trace of wine. Crumpled napkins were scattered across the tablecloth, making it look as if the party had long since ended without me. I sat down on the empty chair, smiled, and said, "Sorry I'm late," and immediately noticed everyone's faces turned to me with strange expressions. My Aunt Linda grinning as if she were in on a joke, my cousin Mike hiding a chuckle in his glass, and even my father, who rarely showed emotion, seemed to be struggling to contain his smile. And then my mother, looking at me with a gentle yet oddly triumphant smile, said, "Darling, we moved dinner up 2 hours. Everyone was so hungry." I froze and stared at her, confused. "What?" "But the table was reserved for 7. I confirmed it this morning." She shrugged and said in a matter-of-fact tone, as if she were commenting on the weather, "We didn't think you'd come. You're always busy with work and everything else." I felt my stomach turn over, because I'd told my boss 3 times this week that I'd definitely be there. I'd even asked my boss to let me leave early, all just to end up here. And now I was hearing that no one believed in me. Selena, my sister, was the first to intervene, gesturing toward the table. "Look, there's still plenty of food left. You can finish the leftovers." I automatically looked where she was pointing and saw only half-eaten breadsticks, chunks of cold pasta lumped together in a serving bowl, and a plate of salad that someone had already picked at with a fork, and the mere sight of it made my stomach clench uncomfortably. I heard my voice, trembling with indignation. "This is crazy. Why didn't anyone call me about the time change?" My father cleared his throat as if preparing to explain, but my mother interrupted him, opening her purse and pulling out a folded piece of paper. Smiling, she handed it to me. "Since you're here, you might as well take care of this." I unfolded the paper and froze. It was the dinner bill for $1,500. I looked at the number twice, making sure my eyes weren't deceiving me. "Mom, is this a joke?" I breathed out, but she looked at me with the same calm expression and said, "Oh, I never joke about money, darling. You have a wonderful job. You don't have a husband or children to spend money on. It's the easiest thing for you." And at that moment, I felt not just anger rising in my chest, but a bitter, corrosive mixture of pain, resentment, and disbelief, because it all sounded as if my only purpose here was to pay for someone else's holiday. Everyone at the table suddenly burst into loud, almost unbridled laughter, and there was no warmth or joy in it, only something caustic and cutting, as if I'd found myself in someone else's play, where my role had been predetermined and no one had even asked if I wanted to play it. Uncle Bob, flushed from the wine, nearly choked as he laughed, leaning back in his chair and wiping his mouth with a napkin, and Aunt Linda, my father's sister, leaned toward me and said with such confidence, as if proclaiming an immutable law, "It's the right decision, Christina. Older children should help their parents. That's how it always has been and always will be. That's what family is all about." I listened to her words and felt as if I were in a bad dream, in which everything was too real to be a joke and too absurd to be true. "Are you serious right now?" I breathed out, looking at the faces that suddenly looked unfamiliar. Dad leaned back in his chair, put his hands behind his head, and as if good-naturedly coaxing a child, said, "Come on, Chris. You know we've always counted on you to help out. It's like a family tradition now. You pay the bills, and we have a good time together. Why break that tradition?" And again, laughter erupted around the table, as if someone had pressed the pre-recorded laugh button. Uncle Bob raised his glass and toasted, "To our family ATM." And at that moment, Selena, my younger sister, my blood relative, shouted, "Yes, our ATM, the one that doesn't even need a PIN." They continued cracking jokes, one after another, as if competing in wit, talking about how lucky they were to have me, their personal bank, how grateful I should be to even be invited, and what an honor it truly was to pay for everyone. I sat, listening to this chorus of voices, and something inside me snapped. Instead of drowning deeper in humiliation and resentment, I suddenly felt a strange, bitter, but unexpected relief. Everything finally became clear, as if someone had abruptly thrown open a window in a dark room. I heard the truth about how they truly saw me, and this truth, however drunken, however harsh, was far more honest than dozens of smiles and stock words. I looked at the bill I was still holding in my hands, at those numbers, cold and precise, like a sentence. $1,500 for a dinner where I didn't even get a plate of food, for a holiday that they postponed without bothering to warn me. And then I did something I'd never allowed myself to do before, not in this family. I carefully tore the paper in half, then again and again, until I was left with tiny squares. Rising from my chair, I tossed them onto the tablecloth like a handful of confetti, saying, "Happy holidays, everyone." The laughter died, as if someone had cut off the oxygen supply. I grabbed my purse and headed for the exit, hearing my mother calling my name behind me, her voice trembling, but I didn't even turn around, just walked faster until the air filled with the freshness of the street and my chest felt lighter. By the time I reached the car, my hands were shaking, not from anger, but from that strange mixture of pain and clarity that comes when you suddenly realize you've slept too long and only just woken up. By the time I got home, my phone was going crazy. 15 missed calls, 23 messages. Selena was texting, "You need to come back right now and pay the bill." Mom wrote, "Christina, this is disgraceful. Please fix it." Dad added, "Your mom is crying. Come back and fix it." New notifications appeared every minute, all repeating the same thing, that I should go back, that I had to, that it was my responsibility. No one asked how I was feeling. No one even tried to apologize. I turned off my phone, threw it on the nightstand, and went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay there with my eyes open and thought about every word spoken at that table, every chuckle, every joke they made. And the more I went over it all in my head, the more I realized it wasn't just about tonight. After all, I'd been paying for my parents' house for 2 years now, their mortgage, their utilities, even their car payments. I supported Selena for the 6 months after she graduated from college, paying her rent while she spent her salary on clothes and entertainment, And all that time, I told myself I was doing it out of love, out of a sense of duty, out of a desire to help. But today, they themselves showed me that to them, I'm just a source of money, an ATM without a PIN, their personal fund. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been run over by a truck. My phone on the nightstand was still vibrating from a stream of messages and calls. I picked it up and saw 47 missed calls, 62 texts, and they were all variations of the same tune. Come back and pay. You've embarrassed us. It's your responsibility. I scrolled through them quickly, almost mechanically, and then hit delete all, leaving most of them unopened because I already knew there was nothing new there and nothing new would be. I was making my morning coffee when my phone vibrated so loudly I almost spilled the boiling water, and a Venmo notification popped up. A payment request from my mom for $1,500 with the subject line, Wedding Anniversary Dinner. I froze for a second, then couldn't help but laugh out loud, the sound bouncing off the walls in the small kitchen. A gift, huh? They seriously wanted me to pay for a dinner I hadn't even seen, calling it a gift for them. I sat down at the table with a mug and, without thinking, opened the app, hit decline, and felt a strange feeling of elation and strength spread through my body, as if I'd just taken my first breath after a long scuba dive. Not even 15 minutes had passed when the phone rang. Mom's name lit up the screen, and for a second I debated whether to answer or let it go to voicemail. But something inside me pushed me to press the green button. I didn't even have time to say hello before her voice pounded in my ears. What the hell is wrong with you? Do you even realize what you've done? Last night you embarrassed your father and me so much that we were ashamed to look the whole family in the eye after that stunt you pulled. I took a sip of coffee, settled more comfortably at the table, and calmly asked, "What trick?" And was answered, "You refused to pay for dinner." I chuckled. I wasn't actually invited to dinner. You just rescheduled it and didn't even tell me. And now you think I'm obligated to foot the bill? Mom didn't let me finish. You were invited, Christina. It's just that everyone was hungry, so we started early. And then, at a family meeting, we decided that you'd pay for dinner because it's only fair. I couldn't help but ask, what meeting? When was I even invited? This is the first time I've even heard of it. Mom sighed with exasperation. It doesn't matter. Everyone knows you can afford it. You earn more than any of us. That's what family is for. I leaned back in my chair and, surprising myself, felt a strange calm. No, Mom. That's not what family does. This is what you're making me do, but I'm not going to be your ATM anymore. I don't have to pay your bills while you spend it all on entertainment and clothes. I'm not your sponsor anymore. There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds, and then Mom's voice changed, becoming soft and cautious, as if she were talking to a capricious child. Honey, that's not what you mean. Look, I know you got upset yesterday. Everyone overdid it a bit and joked around. You know how it is with us. We didn't mean any harm. You're just overly sensitive. I almost laughed. Overly sensitive? You rescheduled dinner without telling me, expected me to pay for everything, joked about using me for money, and now you're saying I'm being dramatic. But Mom didn't even try to justify it. Christina, stop exaggerating. Just transfer the money and we'll forget it ever happened. I hung up without another word. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. I saw her name and immediately rejected it, then blocked the number. Then I blocked Dad, then Selena. But that didn't stop them. From 10 in the morning, my phone started ringing every 10 minutes. Unknown numbers, one after another, and as soon as I heard a familiar voice, I immediately hit end call and added the number to my blacklist. In total, I blocked 8 different numbers in one morning. And then the screen flashed, Aunt Linda. I almost ignored the call, but curiosity got the better of me. I pressed answer and heard her voice. Christina, this is Aunt Linda. Listen, I was there yesterday, and yes, things may have gotten a little out of control, but that's no reason to cut ties with the whole family. I took a deep breath and asked, Aunt Linda, can I ask you something? Tell me. How much money have you given my parents over the last year? How many times have you paid their bills, their mortgage, their car? There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I knew the answer, and that only made it worse. Exactly, I said quietly but firmly. It's always just me. Because I make a good living and I don't have kids, right? So I have to shoulder everything? My aunt struggled to find the right words. Christina, you're successful. It's natural that you want to help your family. I chuckled, though inside there was no longer any anger or sarcasm, only weariness. Helping is one thing, but allowing yourself to be used again and again is quite another. Tell your parents and Selena that they shouldn't try to contact me anymore. It's over for me. I hung up and without hesitation blocked my mother's number, and suddenly the silence that fell over the house seemed so deep and unfamiliar that my ears even began to ring, as if I were hearing my own breath for the first time. No one was demanding money from me anymore. No one was calling with another bill I had to pay. No one was making me feel guilty for having a job in which I was successful. For the first time, an entire weekend was dedicated solely to me. I put on an old t-shirt, turned on some music, and started cleaning, something I hadn't gotten around to for months because all my time and energy was spent plugging my family's financial holes. I went grocery shopping, and for the first time in a long time, I enjoyed choosing groceries just for myself, not counting every penny, worrying about leaving enough for rent for my sister or the electric bill for my parents. I even bought myself a bottle of wine, the same one I always put back on the shelf, considering it too expensive for me. By Sunday evening, I suddenly felt clearly. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I'd lifted a huge weight off my shoulders that I'd been carrying for so long I no longer noticed its weight. I remembered everything I'd given up during that time. The house payments when my father was out of work for 6 months, the repairs to their car, Selena's college expenses, even though she had her own loans, the deposit on her apartment and the first month's rent, a vacation to Florida for which I paid tens of thousands, but I wasn't even invited. I counted it in my head. Thousands and thousands of dollars I could have invested in myself, saved, used for my own purposes. But for some reason I believed that this was exactly what a daughter should do, that this was a real family. But when was the last time I received even the slightest help from them? When I was down with the flu last winter, did anyone bring soup or medicine? When I toiled for weeks without sleep on a project, did anyone ask if I needed support? The answer was obvious. No. In their minds, I existed only to give, not to receive. I had succeeded, so I had no right to complain. I didn't have children, so I had no right to sympathy. I earned well, so I owed. Monday morning, I woke up and for the first time in years, I didn't see a single missed call or angry message on my phone. It was a peaceful morning, pure as fresh snow, and I lay in bed, listening to the silence, unable to believe that it truly belonged to me. 3 months passed like that. 3 months of silence, 3 months of my money remaining with me, 3 months without endless requests and demands. I watched my savings account grow, and for the first time since my college days, I was able to put money aside for the future. I bought new furniture, rearranged the apartment just the way I wanted. I allowed myself to go to the mountains simply because I wanted to be alone, breathe in the cold air, and watch the clouds settle on the peaks. I was finally living my own life, not subsidizing someone else's. But 3 months of peace came to an end on Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work when the phone rang from an unknown number. I automatically wanted to hang up, but I answered anyway. Miss Christina Williams? This is Jessica from the collections department at Chase Bank, a calm female voice said. I set the brush on the edge of the sink and froze. I'm calling about your past due balance on a credit account ending in 4792. You've been behind on payments for 2 months. I held my breath. Excuse me, what? I barely managed to say. I don't have a Chase credit card. The girl didn't change her tone. According to our records, you applied for a Chase Freedom Card 2 months ago. The current balance is $20,847. You've missed 2 minimum payments. My heart pounded, blood pounded in my temples. This was impossible. I'd never opened a card with Chase. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice trembling treacherously. "I didn't apply for anything." Jessica responded calmly, as if she had a rehearsed script. "Let me clarify. The application lists the email address used to open the account. When the bank employee mentioned the email address, my stomach sank because I recognized it immediately. It was Selena's, my sister's, her old email address, the one she always used for personal matters, and which I, of course, would never use for official documents. "That's not my email address," I managed to say in a trembling voice. "That's my sister's." On the other end, I heard the rapid typing of keys, then a calm voice. "I understand, Ms. Williams. But that's the address listed on the application, and it's linked to your Social Security number and your home address. I'll send you the documents now so you can review them." I hung up and, still dressed after work, rushed to my laptop. 5 minutes later, a PDF arrived in my inbox, and when I opened it, my heart sank. My name, my Social Security number, my address, everything matched. But the contact information listed was Selena's very own email address. And when I scrolled to the bottom, I noticed something else. At the bottom was a signature similar to mine, but too sloppy, as if someone had tried to copy it hastily, and next to it was a phone number that definitely wasn't mine. I scrolled through the transaction statements, and what I saw stunned me. Restaurants, expensive clothing stores, electronics, an $800 iPhone, a $500 dinner at a high-end steakhouse, endless spending on designer clothes. $20,000 in just 2 months. And then I saw the application date, and my chill deepened. The card had been opened exactly a month after that dinner at Romano's, when for the first time in my life, I left the table and refused to pay for their party. A month later, having lost my wallet, they decided to take the money another way, using my data, my identity. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the mouse. The realization hit me. My own sister, the very one whose rent I'd been paying for 6 months, had stolen my identity and opened a credit card in my name. It was a betrayal that could not be justified. I immediately dialed Chase again, and when the operator answered, I almost shouted, "This is Christina Williams. I just reviewed your documents." This is fraud. Someone used my information to open an account. It wasn't me. The girl on the line calmly replied, "I understand, Miss Williams. You need to formally file a fraud report and attach all documents. But please note, until the investigation is complete, you are responsible for the balance. This usually takes 30 to 60 days. I also strongly recommend that you contact the police and have the identity theft reported." I hung up and sat on the couch for a long time, staring at those printed statements. $20,000 spent on luxury and entertainment, while I worked nights and shouldered it all for years. And all of this because I finally said no. They punished me for stopping being their endless ATM. My chest tightened with pain and anger, and I realized I couldn't let this go. I grabbed the car keys and drove to a place I hadn't wanted to go for 3 long months, but where a frank conversation was now required. I pulled up to my parents' house, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. When my mother opened the door and saw me, a whole gamut of expressions flashed across her face. Surprise, joy, anxiety, guilt, irritation, and something else I didn't even have time to register. "Christina, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling, as if she already knew why I was there. "We need to talk." "Right now," I said, stepping over the threshold, deciding there was no escaping this conversation. I pushed past my mother into the living room, where my father, as always, sat in his chair, his head glued to the television, as if the world could collapse around him, and he'd still be watching the evening news. He looked up at me. Instead of being surprised or pleased, his lips curled into a wry smile. "Look who's decided to honor us with a visit," he said with that venomous, sarcastic tone I'd known since childhood. I didn't waste a second on politeness. I pulled a folder of bank documents from my bag and, with a sound that was louder than I intended, threw it on the coffee table. The pages scattered, and the headlines with the word Chase, and the debt figures appeared right before his eyes. Selena opened a credit card in my name, I breathed out, feeling a tremor run through my hands. She forged my signature, stole my information, and now I'm $20,000 in the red. Mom picked up the papers, glanced at them, and what I saw on her face pierced me like a cold needle. There was no surprise, no confusion, no horror that any normal person should have felt. There was only a weary irritation, as if I'd brought up a topic they'd already discussed among themselves. "You knew," I said quietly, but every word echoed in the room. "You knew, and you allowed it to happen." "Christina, calm down," she began in her soft, feigned, soothing voice. "We can explain everything." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "She committed fraud. It's a crime, Mom." My father sighed, muted the TV, and turned his entire body toward me, as if preparing for a serious conversation. Only instead of regret, I saw cold calculation in his eyes. "We needed money," he said evenly. "It was the easiest way to get it without bothering anyone." "Without bothering anyone?" I nearly screamed. "You stole from me. From your own daughter." My mother sank down on the sofa, crossing her hands in her lap, as if she were about to give a pedagogical lecture rather than admitting to covering up a crime. "Honey, you have a good job. You can handle it," she said. "We used the card to pay the bills, went out to eat a couple of times, and Selena bought herself a few necessities." Necessities? I grabbed one of the sheets and pointed to the line. $800 for an iPhone? That's her necessity? "Her old phone broke," my mother retorted, as calmly as if they were talking about buying bread. I glanced from her to my father and suddenly realized a chasm had opened between us that could no longer be bridged with any excuses. "You're crazy," I whispered. "This is identity theft. This is fraud. People get arrested for that kind of thing." "Oh, please," my mother waved her hand as if swatting away a pesky fly. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just money. You'll pay it off in a few months and everything will be fine." "I won't pay it back," I muttered, "because I wasn't the one spending that money." My father leaned forward, his face tense, his voice low and heavy. "Listen, that was a lesson, Christina. A lesson for turning your back on your family. You thought you could leave, stop helping, but now you see. You'll have to pay anyway. Maybe next time you'll think twice before abandoning us." I looked at them and couldn't believe my ears. They weren't just making excuses. They were proud of what they'd done. All this, punishment for the time I refused to pay for dinner. "This conversation is over," I said, grabbing the documents from the table. "And our relationship, too. Don't be ridiculous," Mom called as I moved toward the door. "We're family." "Family doesn't steal from each other," I yelled back, slamming the door so hard the glass shook. I got into the car and, not thinking about where I was going, 20 minutes later found myself outside the office of Marcus, my old school friend who was now a lawyer. His office smelled of coffee and paper, and only there was I able to breathe freely for the first time all morning. "Oh my God, Chris," he said, scanning the documents. "This is serious fraud. Identity theft, signature forgery, unauthorized use of credit. You absolutely have the right to file a police report." "What are my options?" I asked, feeling a mixture of rage and relief welling up inside me. "You can go to the station today and file a report," he replied. "They'll probably be arrested. Or we can file a civil suit for damages. Or ... quote. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "We can start with a pre-trial settlement. Send them a letter that clearly states return the $20,000 or face criminal charges and a civil suit." "What would you recommend?" I asked. "Start with a letter," he said firmly. "Give them 60 days. If they don't return it, then we'll get tough." "Do it," I nodded. And at that moment, I felt that for the first time in a long time, I was in control of the situation. Marcus spent 2 days poring over the document, and when he showed me the finished text, it was a 3-page letter, thick with legalese. But the message was as clear and simple as a hammer blow. Return the money or face criminal charges and a lawsuit. He sent the letter registered to my parents' address. The phone calls began almost as soon as they received the envelope. First, the phone rang, and as soon as I saw my mother's name on the screen, my stomach clenched. But I answered. and a second later I regretted it, because her voice, rising to a scream, lashed out at me like a whip. She screamed that I was vindictive, that I was greedy, that a normal daughter would never drag her family to lawyers and the police, that I had disgraced them all. I hung up silently, but soon heard the phone ring again. This time it was my father, speaking accusingly, telling me I was destroying my family over some money, as if $20,000 were a mere trifle, and betrayal and the theft of my data some kind of prank. Then Selena called, her voice shaking, as if she were sitting in a corner, bursting into tears. "Chris, why are you doing this?" "I only took a small amount, a tiny dose, and you turned it into a disaster." "I didn't mean to hurt you," she repeated, each word sounding more false than the last. I couldn't stand the onslaught any longer and forwarded all the calls to voicemail. But that evening, when I finally decided to listen to the messages, it turned out that each one was a variation on the same theme. I'm bad, I'm cruel, I'm a family destroyer, and all because of a small amount of money. A small amount. The $20,000 I could earn in just 3 months, working 7 days a week, loomed large in my mind, but to them, it was nothing. Mom left 3 messages that day, each one like a step in a carefully rehearsed play. In the first, her voice was blazing with rage. "Christina, you're taking revenge, and that's wrong. We're family, and families shouldn't do this to each other." In the second, she changed her tone and tried to play on my guilt. "Your father and I raised you better. We're so disappointed. We trusted you to know that family doesn't threaten family with the police and lawyers." And the third was already negotiating, as if she were trying to negotiate with a business partner. "Maybe we can work something out. Call us back and we'll discuss it like adults." I didn't call back. That evening, a message from Selena appeared on my voicemail, and her words were like a knife to the heart. "Chris, come on, it's only $20,000. You said yourself you were making good money. That's only 3 months of your work. Why are you making such a fuss? We're sisters." I listened and thought, yes, 3 months of my life, no sleep, no days off, no joy, nothing but work. And all so someone could trade it all in at a restaurant for bottles of wine and designer dresses. The next day, I called Marcus. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "They keep calling me," I said. "They act like I'm the bad guy. Like I ruined their lives." Marcus just sighed and answered calmly, with that professional cool that always helped me catch my breath. "That's typical, Chris. People who commit financial crimes often shift the blame onto their victims to create guilt and make them back off. So how do I handle this?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Stick to the ultimatum," he said firmly. 60 days to repay the debt. No more, no less. Otherwise, the police and the courts." I nodded, even though he couldn't see, and said, "That's how it will be." For the next week, the calls didn't stop. The numbers changed, sometimes they were unknown, and one day, without thinking, I answered. It turned out to be my Uncle Bob, my father's brother, a man I'd always considered reasonable. But his words stunned me. "Christina, your parents are devastated. Maybe you should reconsider. You can't resolve these issues through lawyers." I exploded. "Uncle Bob, they stole $20,000 from me. They committed fraud. But this is family," he said. "Families resolve these issues themselves." "Tell me honestly," I asked coldly, "if your family stole $20,000 from you, would you just give up?" He fell silent, and I could almost hear him swallow. "Well, that's different, Chris," he muttered. "What's different?" I could barely contain my scream. "You don't have a husband or kids. It's easier for you. You have more income." I couldn't take it anymore and hung up. These calls and persuasions lasted for almost 2 weeks. Relatives I hadn't seen in years suddenly resurfaced one after another, all with the same tune. "I'm successful. I should just let go. Lawyers shouldn't interfere in family matters. I'm too harsh." But not one of them, not one, even hinted that they were willing to help return even a portion of the amount that, for them, they claimed, was so insignificant. And then there was silence. The calls stopped as abruptly as they had begun, and an uneasy calm set in. And then, On the 58th day, when the ultimatum was almost up, my phone beeped and a notification appeared on the screen. A Venmo transfer for $20,000. The sender was my father. I stared at the screen, and it seemed as if the world around me froze. They really did it. They returned the money. I immediately called Chase Bank, my voice shaking with a mixture of relief and rage as I told the operator, "Pay off the entire balance and close this account forever." When it was all done, I put the phone down and for the first time in a long time, felt the weight on my chest begin to lift. I still had no idea where my parents got that money. Most likely they borrowed or took out a loan, but I didn't care anymore. It wasn't my problem anymore. After that conversation, after that last transfer to my account, there was silence. Deaf, complete, heavy, yet surprisingly liberating. No calls, no texts, no endless emails with requests and manipulations, no unexpected visits in the evenings when, tired, I dreamed only of a cup of tea and silence. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my family had left me alone, and in that pause, free of demands and reproaches, I seemed to have learned to breathe again. Months passed, and I watched in amazement as my life gradually changed. The money that had once been lost to me remained, and I began saving more than ever. I bought tickets, and for the first time in my life, allowed myself to travel alone to Europe, wandering the streets of Paris, eating ice cream in Rome, watching the sunset over the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, and feeling like I was living exactly the life I'd always wanted, but had never been able to because I was chained to other people's debts and desires. Back home, I afforded a new car, not a luxury one, but reliable and beautiful, and opened several retirement accounts for the first time, realizing that my money was finally working for my future, not for someone else's whims. And then, just when I'd almost gotten used to this new, surprisingly easy life, right before Thanksgiving, I received an email from Selena. The subject line read, "Invitation to a family dinner." I opened it and read, "Hi, Chris. We're celebrating Thanksgiving at Mom and Dad's this year. It's going to be just like when we were kids. We'll even do a pirate theme. I hope you can make it. Love, Selena." I read the email twice, and a laugh escaped my lips. Bitter, nervous, but real. A pirate theme. What could be more appropriate for a family where stealing money from loved ones has become the norm? I closed the email and immediately deleted it without writing a word in response. A week before Christmas, I received a package. I opened the box and found inside a pair of sneakers I'd long dreamed of. The exact color and my exact size. The sneakers and an invitation to Christmas dinner. I held them in my hands and my heart fluttered. For the first time in a long time, perhaps one of them thought of me not as a wallet, but as a woman with her own tastes and dreams. For a moment, a glimmer of hope flickered within me, a tiny spark that maybe they were capable of thinking of me as more than just numbers and debts. I kept the sneakers for myself, but I didn't go to dinner. Instead, I bought a symbolic gift for each of them. Nothing expensive, just a small token in honor of the holiday, and ordered delivery. I stayed home and spent Christmas alone, in silence, with the lights twinkling and the scent of cinnamon in the air. It wasn't the Christmas you see in the movies, but it was mine, and it was peaceful. Now, almost a year later, I'm living a life I couldn't even imagine. My phone is silent, free of endless requests and demands. No one makes me feel guilty for wanting to spend my money on myself. No one treats me like an ATM that always has to dispense cash. I have more money in my account than ever before, and I'm making plans, thinking about another vacation, maybe to Japan this time, thinking about buying my own house where every detail will be chosen by me and for me. From mutual friends, I heard that Selena has changed. She's taken a second job, started helping her mom and dad pay the bills, and it seems that when I stopped being their endless source of income, they had to learn to cope on their own. Who would have thought that my firm boundaries would become a lesson for the whole family? But despite this, I'm in no rush to return. I'm not ready for reconciliation yet, and perhaps I never will be. The trust is so deeply damaged that it can't be repaired with pretty words or gifts. They didn't just ask me for help. They stole, they cheated, they committed a crime, and those scars can't be erased from my memory. And yet, I don't live with hatred. I don't want them in my life now, but I don't burn bridges with anger either. Maybe one day everything will change. Maybe the day will come when they truly admit what they did and sincerely apologize. Or maybe that will never happen. And I finally understand. This is okay too.